Oh boy, holiday season is upon us, and that means another Christmas banner with another spark and pretty relevant meta unit. Let's talk about it.
Let the lesson begin.
What's up guys, Akariss here, bringing you another Fire Emblem Heroes video. Today's video is, as you expected, a should you pull and analysis video on the duo of this particular banner, or Harmonized Hero, which is Lysithea, of course. So yeah, quite a bit to talk about here. If you haven't watched my impressions reaction video, I suggest you go do that first for a little bit of like context. But also if you want to get more of an opinion on Manuela, Arthur, and Mirabilis, who are not covered in this video. So yeah, go watch that if you want more on them. This video will focus on Lysithea, her analysis, her impact on the game, in my opinion, and of course I also will share the results of the community both in my private Discord and Patreon and YouTube as well, what you guys have said. So yeah, a bit to talk about here, and I want to of course clear the air with any misconceptions or thoughts on how I feel Lysithea stands within this game. Of course, reiterating some of those thoughts from the impressions video. So yeah, this is a pretty important banner for a couple of reasons. It lasts a full month, so you have plenty of time to decide whether you should be pulling or committing to a spark. Many of us probably don't have many orbs left from a combination of really high quality stuff, including the ninja banner, the mythic legendary banner with Eitri, the new mythic Ash, and now we have this. Plus we literally are going to have like anniversary coming up, Hero Rises, all these like massive events. So I'm sure many of us don't have too many orbs, but nonetheless, hopefully this video should help you at least steer you in a direction on what you want to do either now or in the future. Lysithea may come back as a Hero Rises potential winner. Potential. I'm not going to guarantee that does happen because there's just too many random outcomes for that to really depend on. She will definitely come back on double special. However, there is a spark here, and that is worth talking about. Okay, so with Lysithea, what I do want to talk about, of course, is where she lands statistically and comparatively speaking to Ninjoran. I think would be the biggest reference point, but there is also as well Reinhardt, and I guess to a lesser extent Spring Severa, which are Brave Tome Cavalry units. Brave Tome Cavalry units are very good. I don't think anyone really needs to like dispute this. A Brave Tome Cavalry unit is basically good in every single mode in this game, which is Arena, AR, PV, whatever. You're going to get some incredible value if you choose to invest in these type of units. Lysithea is no exception to this rule. There are a couple of things that make her stand out compared to the other ones, but isn't necessarily better than the other ones, and I want to make that pretty clear. So being a colorless does put her in my opinion, mostly an advantageous position, which is that she's going to have good matchups across the board, and is only really weak to like Raven tomes and such, which do exist, but are less of an issue. And generally speaking, if you like, let's say, use her on defense, then Raven tomes are usually covered by an appropriate color that covers that. For example, if you have, let's say, Fallen Leon as a Raven tome user, and if you have a solid red on your defense team, such as Legendary Sigurd or Dual Lif, then Leon is going to struggle a bit. So that color coverage and range overlap is important for fundamental defense design, which is why Lysithea is going to stand out anyways, because you're just going to create a balanced team comp. But Lysithea is important for a couple of reasons. So I want to bring your attention, first of all, to the skills, her weapon and C-Few. These are pretty important to make cases for the builds that I'm going to showcase later, which is her weapon is a Slaying Tome, which is already fairly rare. Her attack speed, like attack and speed +6 condition, is very easy to meet. It's just the good old 25% HP condition, whatever, that's almost always going to be it. In effect, finally, we have two different speed conditions, which are pretty important to consider both now and later. The first one is as long as you're faster, like between 1 and 9, you get a desperation effects, you like attack twice before they do, and the other one is if you're 10 speed faster than your opponent, you get a brave effect, which means you double. Now 10 speed is quite a big gap, to be honest, and honestly she's not always going to meet that condition against, especially against faster or near, like a lot, not necessarily faster, but pretty fast opponents. It's actually pretty hard to meet, which means that both the speed and the attack IV are important, and don't try to overthink whether you should pick one over the other. I think leaning towards the speed IV is the right approach, but on the other hand, attack IV is very impactful against the slower meta units, such as those armors that, you know, like Fallen Edel, for example, or Henriette or Gustav or whatever, who don't have a speed set anyways. So just like getting as much attack is important. So it's a pretty, like, it's a balancing act whether you should be committing to mostly speed or attack. Depends on your builds and mythic blessings and whatnot to balance that out. Now, another really important skill here is actually C feud. Now, compared to R feud, and likely we'll get B feud and G feud later, in my opinion, C feud is likely the most impactful C skill or feud skill. And hear me out on this one. The reason I think this one is actually quite important compared to other ones is, first of all, it might only work in the condition of having matchups against a colorless feud unit, like a colorless enemy unit or a colorless support unit, which we'll get into. But those two scenarios, even though they're conditional, are still pretty important, especially for something like Arena or AR Defense, where I think for sure you're going to get a lot of value. So I want to explain why. First of all, there are quite a few relevant colorless meta units right now that you should consider when, you know, playing the game, and that obviously would be something like Fallen Edelgard. Many people still choose to use Fallen Edelgard, and most notably, Flane. So Flane gets shut down by C feud, and this means that stuff like Armor Balls cannot use Flane to support against a C feud unit. Well, they can, but it doesn't do anything. Second, someone like Fallen Edelgard as a main carry gets really hurt a lot by the inflicting -4 to all stats effect of C feud. So that is crazy, because that there's not really a comparable C skill for a cav unit, honestly. Like, you can probably use something like Joint Drive, Fatal Smoke potentially, or Panic Smoke, or Pulse Smoke, I guess. But essentially, C feud, when it's going to work, will guarantee those matchups or make them favored for your character, or shut down really impactful supports like Flane. And Flane is just one example, but there's actually quite a few colorless support units that could potentially be combined or used with stuff like Armor Balls, or just in general, right? So I do think C feud is probably the most impactful of the feuds that we'll get, and her weapon is quite good. Now, comparatively speaking, I've heard this made quite a bit as well, which is, how does she match up against, like is she better than Ninjorin? Does she power creep Ninjorin? My answer is a firm no, for many reasons. She probably has better matchups than someone like Ninjorin overall, but Ninjorin has a couple advantages as well. First of all, Ninjorin is a duo unit as opposed to harmonized hero unit, and in my opinion, duo heroes are better to max invest versus a harmonized hero unit because of their arena usage being far better when it comes to scoring, and therefore the rewards you get. So that is important to consider. The second reason is literally just the duo versus harmonized skill. A self dance is way better than Lysithea's bonus doubler effect. Straight up, as simple as that. You also don't even need to consider like trying to mix and match games like Sacred Stones or Three Houses. Ninjorin is generally better in most content than Lysithea is, but Lysithea is still very powerful nonetheless, and still has access to C Duel Cavalry 4 should you want to bring her in Arena, where she still will be quite powerful either way. Another thing to consider, of course, is in my opinion that Ninjorin's true damage is actually really good and underappreciated for a couple of reasons. First of all, if you choose to, let's say like Ninjorin has a bad matchup against someone like Henriette where she's pretty much doing 0, she's not actually doing 0. She actually would end up doing 7 times 4 because of just the speed discrepancy and true damage. That adds up to being 28 true damage. Now, on how I've used Ninjorin on defense so far as an Ninjorin user is I run her with Miracle. This means that she survives Henriette because she ends up quadding 28 true damage, then gets danced by Wing's Mercy, and ends up doing potentially another, either sniping something else or potentially almost getting the kill on Henriette by providing another 14 or up to 28 true damage, depending on the scenarios, of course. But you'll see how that adds up in even the worst matchups. Whereas slaying tomes, while are really good, gotta consider that a lot of foes use card effects or special fighter effects or something like that, where you're just not really getting any value out of the slaying, and true damage is good. The biggest advantage, in my opinion, of Lysithea is colorless. Straight up. Just being a colorless is good, as opposed to like the green versus red or green versus blue scenarios where you're either overkilling or just not doing anything. So that is where I firmly believe that Lysithea versus Ninjoran stand. One isn't like power crept over the other. They're just different units doing different things and should be built and considered differently. Don't feel like you're missing out on this or Ninjoran. Honestly, you'll be good with both. When it comes to the stats, skills, and arena, I think I've like covered a couple of these things, but essentially the stats are as you'd expect, very offense favored with low HP, actually being pretty good for some of the builds I'll show later. And skills, in terms of fodder, are whatever. Wouldn't really recommend foddering. Honestly, Sea Feud might be worth foddering, but generally speaking, you should keep these characters and use them for something else. Finally, in arena, as I mentioned, a Brave Tome Cav is pretty good, combined with Far Trace, and using Ruptured Sky with a Slaying Tome, you'll have a pretty good time in Arena. It's just unfortunate that the C Duel Cav and dual skills in general are only 180 versus Ninjoran, who's 195. That is a huge difference when it comes to optimizing. Alright, let's talk more about some budget options here if you choose to Spark Lysithea or maybe even merger in the future. A couple of things you should consider for builds is, first of all, definitely use her on defense. You can enable dual hindrance, and you can run two variants that I feel are pretty solid for at least budget versions for Lysithea, which is just replacing Swift Sparrow 3 with ARD Speed Res. You can choose to keep Swift Sparrow 3, but I do feel like adding a little bit of res bulk and maximizing speed is pretty good. A couple of reasons for that is, of course, if you're unmerged, you don't have as much speed, and this weapon really does depend on that speed. Additionally, extra res does help quite a bit to help with some matchups, such as Henriette, where surviving that could end up creating a momentum shift into kills. So slaying Moonbow against someone like Henriette is 2 Moonbows and some pretty decent damage, whereas the Miracle build on the second budget build here means that you survive Henriette and then potentially create some sort of Wings of Mercy follow-ups. Both are pretty good, and both will work pretty well. Just depends what your team has on defense. Either way, on defense, she's going to do pretty good. If you wanted to more like min-max this, then definitely opt for something like ARD attack speed, where you're just going to do more damage across the board. She does want attack and speed at the end of the day, and speed res just happens to be the budget option. Finally, because of her low HP stat, if you wanted to use a trait fruit, or you ended up with either a minus HP plus attack or minus HP plus speed, then you can combine Fury 4 with attack defense push seal to give you exactly 50% health with 3 mythics. This is 3 mythics shown here, so after 3 engagements, you will be at exactly 24 HP, and that is perfect for additional Wings of Mercy follow-ups. So pretty nice. I mean, this is standard by now, and Linja's done it, and Ninjoran's done it, so you can definitely do it with Lysithea as well. I do feel like Ninjoran does this better, though, because Self-Dance is better than Bonus Doubler, and a Self-Dance is an additional action when you're trying to sweep or PvE the team. However, it can be done with Lysithea, so that's to be noted right here. Alright, now if you do intend to bring her to the max investment, which I wouldn't blame you for because Lysithea is very powerful and is useful in basically every single game mode, then these are a couple ways to do it. Similar to what I showed in the previous bunch of builds here, we have the max nuke build, I'd call that, in the first one, which is just stacking as much attack and speed as possible, using a lull skill rather than a trace skill, because lulls shut down buffs, and you don't really want to use trace and have your like character run back in defense, you want to keep pressure. So that is the max nuke build, very powerful. The second variant is a bulk build, which also is still going to be pretty good. I do think Ninjoran runs a bulk build better because she has true damage, and even if she's not doing necessarily crazy amounts of damage, having that bulk is still really good because it creates pressure where a lot of mythics might be missing kills, or because that bulk can therefore retaliate and kill stuff. Combined with that slaying weapon, it's pretty nice to have just a one-charge special on the enemy phase as well, where someone attacks into you and you retaliate with that special in most cases. So both the bulk and the offensive powerhouse build are good on defense. You can't really go wrong with either. Use whatever fodder you have at the end of the day. Finally, in air offense, if you do use her and merge her quite a bit, you can repurpose her. Instead of trying to be a Wings of Mercy beacon, definitely try to aim for something that's more PvE sweeping, kind of killing or cleaning up, hidden run kind of combinations here. Because as I said, with the amount of power that Lysithea has, it's going to be pretty easy to just clean up teams if you can get a nice hidden run chain going with someone like Bridal Fjorm or Mila or wherever you tend to use her. Either way, as you no doubt have guessed by how long we've been talking about Lysithea, she's a pretty good unit, and investment in her is not going to go to waste. Is she worth pulling, in my opinion? Depends. I don't think you should be pulling for resident battles, but I do think if you have some usage in AR defense, if you play for AR defense, AR offense, or potentially even summoner duels, if you really get a lot of joy out of that, she's going to be pretty good. So, don't be afraid. Okay guys, let's jump into what the community actually thinks about this. So first up, we have some poll results here, which are, I'd say maybe not as impactful something as like the Mythic banner, or definitely not as impactful as the Mythic Legendary banner that passed, but still people are saying they're going to be spending orbs here, or at least a lot of people will go for a Spark. I don't blame them. Seasonals for a Spark are rare and therefore pretty good reason to go for. However, I feel like seeing the yes all my orbs at 7% is just indicative of you guys just being out of orbs, and therefore you're spending like 50 orbs and you're out of orbs. I wouldn't be surprised if that were the case. Those of you that are still saving for something later, I hope that pays off. Okay, first comment here by Drabe says Lysithea looks cool and the slaying makes her almost better than Ninjoran, but the BST doesn't make it worth it to pursue as a merge project. I already have a ton of calves for air defense, and she is also very likely to win Hero Rises, so I'm probably just skipping. I might reconsider when the Legendary banner drops. Okay, so yeah, that's a good point. The banner lasting a full month gives you plenty of time to consider how you want to approach this banner, even with Lysithea being as powerful as she is. And I wouldn't necessarily call, again, I wouldn't call her better than someone like Ninjoran or Spring Severa or Reinhardt, because again, matchups are going to vary across those three different calves. Reinhardt likely being the weakest, but hey, Dire Thunder refined soon, right? Copium, copium, copium. Yeah. Anyways, don't feel compelled that you need to be chasing after the newest, shiniest toy, so be mindful. Lysithea is good, but if you already have options, you probably don't need it. Moving on here. A comment by Gay Creeper who says, free poll only, Lysithea looks like a tempting unit to spark, but isn't super helpful to my account and have no orbs anyway, because of Ash. I imagine others are in a similar scenario too. Can totally relate. Just had some really high quality stuff, and if you just keep dropping these high quality stuff on us, no one's really going to have much resources to commit. This might honestly be a good place for many of us to be skipping, just because we need to stock up on some of the better, higher value stuff coming later. A comment by Prophecy on YouTube says, I have less orbs than a Spark, so I guess all my orbs lol. Yeah. Tempted to post 10 Manuela, need a high merged Armor Marcher in Fire Season for Legendary Edel. Now, this is an important thing to talk about because if you don't have a lot of orbs, be careful if you're committing to 4-star focuses. I know I didn't talk about Manuela or Arthur or Mirabilis here, but be careful because 4-star focuses are not a guarantee, even though they are more common summoning for. You could still end up spending like 400 orbs trying to plus 10 a 4-star focus. And it is a disaster scenario if you do not plus 10 them right away, because then you'll have to end up waiting potentially over half a year to finally complete them on the double special. So you would have this like mid-merged or potentially high-merged 4-star focus just hanging around your barracks but not being used right away. I do agree though that combining Legendary Edo with an Armor March unit is very important and you'll get a lot of value that way. However, we did just get Ignats dropped and that might be the safer bet where you're spending Grails instead of Orbs. Keep that in mind. Okay guys, so that basically covers my full analysis here on Lysithea plus the should you pull and what you guys are planning to do. Hopefully this helps you make a decision here or there. You haven't already gone all in here on this banner and you're at least being a bit patient to see what comes next or what you might need after watching something like this. Thank you for watching as always. Upcoming soon for videos is going to be the Hall of Forms video and likely some gameplay footage with commentary and a hero review on my Patreon as well. So as always guys, smash that like button and sub if you haven't already. Thank you so much for doing so. If you love me and the content I do, or you want to partake in hero reviews coming up soon, or be featured in these comments in the future should you pull videos, consider my Patreon in the description below. If you check that out, it means a lot. Thank you. See you in the next one. Much love. Peace.
It's over.